So I want to give you some heads up on where we're headed for the next few weeks. We're going to do the second part. Well, I'll tell you where we're going today. Next week, we're going to do, it will be at least 1 week, but 2 weeks possibly of how to share your faith. Because let's face it, as soon as I say that, like you get that little thing in your stomach, like, and so it doesn't look like you think it does, if that makes sense. Like, the way it's been communicated to us is not biblical. But I want us to go through it because people need to hear this good news. So what does that look like? How can we practically do that without going, ooh, I don't want to do it like that? We all have our own voice. We all have our different thing. But when you know that about 5% of people have this spiritual gift of evangelism, it's like, but we all have a part in it. So what does that look like? And then after that, we're going to do at least 2 weeks of a series on money. And the reason we're doing it on money is because in loving God and loving others, that is under there. Everything is under there. And I was just reading through this passage and it just kept sticking with me. So I just changed the plans and I want to have a little time to talk about that. So if you have your Bibles, grab them right now and go to Acts 2:42. And I want to give you a little bit of a catch-up because this builds on what we did last week. And so I'm moving forward now because last week I saw that Trish was on the corner over there having to like lean in. So Jason, Laura, I want to make sure you have a clear view and then I'm not back here and you can't see me. So I got your back. So we talked about Jesus. Either he was, if you look through the New Testament, you look through his ministry, he was either going to a meal, at a meal, or leaving a meal. Like it was a huge part of his ministry. And when he did that, and that's why I pulled this passage up for us. We turned the TVs, but now we turn the TVs, now I can't see them. The tax collectors and the notorious. So, we have our little scale of sinners, right? We do. He doesn't, but we do. So Luke was like, the bad ones, they were all coming near to Jesus to listen to him. And then the Pharisees and the scribes kept muttering and indignantly complaining, saying, this man accepts and receives and welcomes preeminently wicked sinners and eats with them. Because when you eat with someone, you are saying to them, you're welcoming them, you're approving of them, you're accepting them, you're bringing them in. And so Jesus, while he was doing this, then was communicating, God loves you. I take you in, you're in, we're cool, we're friends, which was against the law. The law said that you shouldn't cross those lines, so Jesus broke the law to have meals with others. And by doing that, when we share those meals, something special happens. So now I want to do the second part of that, though. So I'll start it with this. Our family, we have the two teenagers, there's two teenagers and then one away at college. And so this past year, we were really slow adopters to the reality that our teenagers were going to be gone a lot. Like we thought, okay, you're getting older, but you'll still be here sitting in the house. You're not going to go do anything. It never really crossed our minds until we realized it felt like we were, what's that called when the empty nesters? That's what it felt like. I'm like, what the heck? So then I dropped the hammer. I did what the man of the family should do. And I said, you know what we're going to do from now on? We're having Sunday night meal. We're together on Sunday nights. And I remember other people would do that, and I try to hang out with them like, oh, we've got our family Sunday night meal. And I'm like, oh, come on. Because when it's not your family and someone else is getting away to plan this, it's kind of irritating because they're not what you want them to do. But with our family, I was like, this is so important. And, of course, is this not working right? Give me bits. Keep going. You're slowing it in. Keep going. So, when I shared it with the family, everyone, not just the kids, everyone was like, well, what if, and well, I was going to, and I'm like, wait, what's going on here? This is our family. But I know, because we've been doing it now for a little while, now it's like, look forward to. It's still like, oh, but I was going to, but now they've kind of like resigned themselves. When someone says, oh, hey, we're gonna, no, I have to stay home with my family. But when they stay home, they're at least enjoying it. Mm-hmm. And what happens when we commit to something when we devote ourselves to it, something changes over time and it becomes this cherished thing that you get upset if it doesn't happen. Because I remember years ago when someone in our family, extended family, couldn't do Thanksgiving. It was always at their house. We had to come up with a plan. We're like, oh, what are we going to do? So a bunch of us said, well, let's just go to Mammoth and spend Thanksgiving together in Mammoth. And so we did it that year, and then we did the next year, and then we did the next year, and I don't know how many years it's been, at least 10. And so if we don't do that this year, my kids will have a rebellion against me. Because at first it was like, oh, but can't we stay home because our friends will be here, and why are we going away to Mammoth? And then you keep doing it, and it starts becoming this, you see the beauty in it because you're devoted to it, because you're committed to it. And so I know that this Sunday meal is going to be that same way. And I know that my son that's away at college, when we call him now, because he can't come back on Sunday nights, and we call him and do the FaceTime thing, you can see something different with him, with us. And we also know that somebody's missing, but it's like, but Sunday nights keep going. And this is still new. But that's what happens when we have a commitment. That's what happens when we stick to something. So what I want you to do is open up Acts 2:42, and I want you to consider the possibility of what your life could look like if you devoted to what the early church did. So I'm going to try to pull it up here, and then we're going to get really deep here. So we've gone through this passage before, but we're going to look at it in a different way. So this is the early church. So Jesus is risen from the dead, and he's gone back up to heaven. And so you've got all the people left. And so they're going to carry on with what they were taught. And so they begin to do this. They committed themselves to the teaching of the apostles, the life together, the common meal, and the prayers. And so I want to break each of those down, but I want to spend more time on a few of them than most. Say, the main word here is they committed. Now, I don't know what translation you're looking at. This is the Message translation, but it's often translated devoted. So devoted means to persist. It means to be intently engaged in. It means to attend to it constantly. And so this was something that was a pattern, much like I talk about Sunday nights. They did this, and they did it almost daily. So they're committed to these things almost daily. The teaching of the apostles, which is the teaching of Jesus, because the apostles were so close to Jesus. Although he taught to everybody, they got to spend so much time with him, they were kind of set aside like, hey, can you share with us all the nuances? Because we are now going to follow this Jesus, basically break the law from the religion we were at, and add on to that, because Jesus says he's the fulfillment of that, and we believe that, yet we have friends that are still part of the Jewish faith, and they don't believe this, and so we're going to step out. But what do we do? What does this look like to live this? And they called it the way. That's what they were referred to. They weren't referred to as Christians, but they were considered followers of the way. And that's how they were titled. And so what is the way? And so that's why they were committed and devoted to this teaching. Now for us, I hope you're not looking to me or podcasts or other people. You need to be in the Word, because they didn't have the New Testament. They had the future writers of the New Testament. But we have it all. If they had that, they would be freaking out. Wait, it's all in book? Wait, what? It's like here, we just have it? But they were devoted to it, so they would go and spend time with those who held this treasure. And then it says, they were devoted to the life together. Now, I love the way the Message translates that, because if you look at your typical translation, it'll probably say fellowship, right? And most people really don't know what fellowship means, do we? We throw the word out, fellowship, and we're like, I think it means like hang out. I think it means like it's such a churchy word, everybody says it, but nobody really knows what it means. And so this is the translation, the life together, where there's a dependence and a commitment to each other, where you're literally doing life together. Oh, you're moving? I'm going to be there. Oh, you need something? I'm going to show up. Oh, your kid just won this thing. I want to celebrate with you. Oh, this happened to one of your family members. I want to help you take care of that. Hey, you know what? Let's just watch football. It's just doing life together. And it's not just like, oh, it's just us. No one else is coming in. But there's a commitment and a devotion to this. And let's face it, we're in a culture that is contrary to that. And that's why this church and so many other churches, it's hard to really live this way. Because most of us are coming for ourselves. But this is saying they were devoted to the life together, which means they were devoted to other people. That's transformational when you really step back and think about it. Like, I get all of these memes, I get all of these things that people will send me, or these, who's the really tall guy with the huge hands that does the motivational speaking to pump you up?
Tony Robbins.
Yes, Tony Robbins. And there's a ton of them. And there's other people that are going on their own, and they're Instagram influencers, and they're writing these nice things, and they'll show themselves like working out or doing different things. And the thing they always pump out is you can get what you want, and all you got to do is work hard, and then you will achieve your goals. Some of them are physical, some of them are emotional, some of them are all of them, some are financial. But yet this life, the way, is one in which you are first and foremost looking to the Lord, loving God, and then to people. Like to give you an example on this, and we'll touch on this later with finances, is everyone pretty much has financial goals. Whether they've written them down or not, you have financial goals, right? These are my goals. But rarely do people write down their giving goals. Rarely do people have giving goals. They have accumulation goals, but rarely do we have giving goals. Like, this is our goal. By this time, we want to be given 10%, 20%, 50%. We want to be able to take care of this. We want to simplify our life here so that we can do this. Wouldn't that be exciting? And that's so rare. And this life together is like that. It is rare. It is not that common. The next one is the common meal. Now, the phrase there is an idiom, like when you say, hey, let's go get lit. You're like, oh, that probably means you're going to go get hot, right? But if you do that with another culture, lit, like, are you going to light things up? Are the lights going to go on? We don't know what that means. For them, it was the breaking of bread because that was a primary staple. It wasn't like, hey, should we do this? Should we do that? It's pretty much standard. Oh, we're going to eat bread. Because it was cheap, it was easy, and it would fill you up. And so breaking of bread means to share a meal. But as we talked about, and I won't go too much into that at the moment, when you share that meal, something happens. And here's a cool thing I didn't know. They called that meal, they had a meal for it. They had a name for this meal. And it was a special meal, and it happened all the time, but it was with the believers. And this meal they called the agape. And I was like, well, what that mean? That's another. But they just took the word for unconditional love and attached it to the meal. So they would have this meal, and they could give it any name. And of course, when you have some kind of thing that you name or you brand, you name it so that the name matches what the purpose of it is. And it was meant to show, look, this is when we love each other. This is when we sit down and we share this meal, what we're saying is, everybody's welcome here. Everybody's in. Isn't that powerful? They were devoted to this. Like, if there's one word I want us to keep going back to over and over again during the brief time we have left, it's that commitment to sharing a meal. Because I, other than this Sunday night meal, have never really made a commitment to meals with other people. I'm like, if I get invited or I feel like it, I'll go through seasons when I really don't want to see anyone. You know what I'm talking about? When you're like, ugh, it's just easier to stay home. And so much of our culture has gone in that direction for obvious reasons because of the pandemic. But it's almost like, it's just easier because I don't have to deal with people. And this phrase has helped me through so much in the past 3 years. This devotion, it's not that you have to. You know those things where you feel like, I have to go to this? Like maybe it's some event that your friend or your spouse or it's a family commitment, and you're like, I have to go to this. Probably like my kids still with this Sunday night meal thing. Like, I have to go. But what I've learned, and I heard this phrase, and it's just I was like, that phrase was made for me. It's not that you have to go. It's that you get to go. And it's that whole attitude shift of gratitude and appreciating what you have. And so when it comes to this devotion, this commitment, sometimes it's hard. But when you change your attitude and go, but I get to, because when you do share those meals, there's something beautiful about it. I have a standard group of people that I walk with, and it's much like any relationship, like a brother or a sister or even a spouse. The people you're closest with, you get sick of the quickest. You know what I mean? You're like, ugh. You meet someone new, you don't have all those scars, you don't have all those patterns built up like, oh, they're going to do this again. They always do this. They're always on time, or they're always late, or whichever one it slides on. And yet with this group, I got to that point where I was like, you know what? I feel like I have to go. I don't want to go anymore. And so I was much less frequent. Never lied about it. Hey, we're doing this. Oh, no, you guys have fun. And I just skip out. And almost always there were meals. And I just got to the point where I'm like, I don't feel like it. Right? And if you don't feel like it, then why do it if you don't feel like it? And then as I started looking into the apostles' teaching, which came from Jesus, and looking into the Word, it was like, I'm supposed to be doing this. I'm supposed to be committed. If I'm committed to these people, I'm committed also to this meal together, this common meal. And my life group, that's what we call ourselves, a life group. This life group, they eat all the time. Like they look for any excuse, to the point where I'm like, how are we affording this? But I started going with that different attitude of not I have to, but I get to. And I want to say pleasantly surprised, but that's not powerful enough. I was overwhelmed with, there's still beauty here, even when I don't feel like it. Even when I'm irritating them and they're irritating me, there's something that happens here. And that's why this early church had this devotion, this commitment, this adherence, this pattern and this rhythm to this common meal. So Jesus not only used it for ministry, but then the church, the people of God, they built everything on this. They built it on Jesus' teaching. They built it on life together, the common meal, and this last one, and the prayers. Now, when you look at that, it might look like, oh, I think that's grammatically incorrect. It should be just and to prayer. Because if you have the NIV version, it says to prayer. But in the Greek, they don't have those kind of articles, but the emphasis is on the prayers. Because there was also, for the Jewish faith, they kept on with the prayer times. There's set times to pray. They were called the prayer times. It wasn't just, hey, when you want to pray, pray in the morning, pray at night. They had set times because they all, as a community, wanted to be devoted to this. The thing that we have that's the most similar to it, at least here at Branch, is on Wednesdays. So if you're not getting those texts that say, hey, we're going to pray together, that's what that is. It's an attempt to create a rhythm of prayer of us together. And the time will come when we have our space, when we can go, hey, we can meet here on Tuesday mornings together for whoever wants to get up early and just come and pray. So these prayers, it was part of the Jewish community. But it was important that they did it together. Notice that they were committed to the prayers, but when they did these prayers, they were done together. These set times that they were talking about. There's always a time to pray by yourself, but they had set times when they prayed together. So going back to this common meal, and we touched on this last week with Jesus, that in the Near East, to share a meal was more than just eating together. It meant there was peace, there was trust, there was fraternity, there was forgiveness. It was understood that if you say, I want to have dinner with you, I want to have a meal with you, it means I want a friendship with you. So when Jesus was doing this and sharing meals, he was communicating to the notorious, I want a friendship. I want us to be friends. And I would love to do a whole other sermon on what does friends mean, but I'm just going to hope that you have some semblance of that from a biblical perspective. And so when we share meals together, what we're communicating is, I'm willing to be friends. Now, of course, you have your different levels of friends, right? If everybody was here this morning, there's no way that you could be close with everyone, but you can still be friends. Like, I love when people, like, for example, when I heard Eric right before we started say to Ryan, hey, was that you I saw? There's like this connection, right? And I've heard other people, I was somewhere this week and they said, isn't that person from Branch? Like, they didn't know them, but it was like that semi kind of like they're familiar. So there's another level, like I'm associated with them. But there's a difference between having people you're associated with and people like you're friends with. And so this early church, there was a commitment to that. And here's what I want us to look at. I'm so excited to show this to you. So they were devoted to this. Now look at this community. Look here in verse 43. This is all together, so it's not really broken up. It was just one big statement, but I broke it up. They were devoted to those 4 things, and then everyone around was in awe. You think? Like, imagine as this community continues to develop, as we're replanting branches, and as this core planting group, as we begin to live this way, people are going to be in awe. All those wonders and signs done through the apostles, and all the believers lived in a wonderful harmony, holding everything in common. That doesn't mean they agreed on everything. That's not what holding everything in common means. It means, this isn't my car. It's our car. You need a car? My wife's car broke down. Again, it's a Toyota. It's not supposed to happen. It broke down, and one of our friends from Branches said, look, whenever that happens, you can use this car. You know what I did? I said, you got it. Because I trusted that they meant that. It's just a beautiful thing to know you're being taken care of by each other. Someone here at Branches may be moving soon to another house. We're not going to let them move by themselves. Hey, that looks heavy. Good luck with that. Like, there's this, I'm there for you. These arms, everything is in common. This strength that I have is your strength. They had everything in common. They sold whatever they owned and pooled their resources so that each person's need was met. So if someone had a need and there wasn't just cash lying around, but they knew something to be done, they're like, well, I guess we got to sell this. You don't see that very often. That's why people were in awe. And it wasn't just the people in the church that were in awe. Let's continue on here. Verse 46. They followed a daily discipline. So when we say daily discipline, discipline is just another word for devotion, a commitment. They followed a daily commitment of worship in the temple. Not once a week, every day, followed by meals at home. Now, this is a different time, a different place. I don't think that's realistic today in our culture. What it looks like is different, but the devotion and the commitment is the same. Followed by meals at home, every meal a celebration. That's Eugene Peterson sliding that in and is us trying to understand what a meal at home is. It's a celebration, exuberant and joyful as they praised God. People in general liked what they saw. Talking about people on the outside. So every day, their numbers grew as God added those who were saved. Now, elsewhere, the apostles, Jesus gave a clear direction on how to share faith with someone else, how to share who Jesus is, to be a witness. This is what I've seen, this is what I know, this is what he's done in my life. But this, people were just coming in like, what's going on with these people? They saw what they saw it, and in general, they liked what they saw. So every day, the number grew as God added to those who were saved. So, this is what I want to recommend to us. I want us to consider on an individual basis, do we want to be part of the corporate commitment to be devoted to each other in these 4 areas? But especially I want to focus on the common meal, because that's the series we're going through. It doesn't mean we ignore the other ones, but to focus on that, because the meal, I think, is one of those areas that we've kind of lost touch with. We've forgotten its importance. So this could look different. This could look many different ways. For us, what we're going to start doing as Branch's leadership is one time a month, while we're here in this space, we're going to go down the hill, take a left, first right. They got Baja Fresh, they got Poke Tea, they got all that food stuff. We're going to go and eat together. Not everyone can do it every week. That's the way it works. But for us to begin to develop that pattern. Can you imagine what that will look like when more likely than not you're there and other people are there and we're all just eating together? And then, of course, while they're eating together, other people we see are going to be there, right? Hey, what's up? What's going on? Oh, nothing. We just, after church, we eat together. Well, what? You actually, spend time with each other afterwards? And let's face it, it's not that big of a commitment, right? You're going to eat anyways. But that idea of us doing that, so we're going to do that. We've talked about, while we're here, we have to run it by the landlord. But we're like, what if we had, the taco truck show up and we just had tacos afterwards so we don't have to go somewhere? What if we just called up our ice cream truck friends and said, hey, you come by here at this time. The kids will buy some and the adults will pretend like they don't like it, but then they'll buy twice as much as the kids would eat. And we just have ice cream. Well, ice cream, is that a common meal? Oh, it's common and it's good. But just something, we've done it before, shaved ice. But I want to ask you to consider this. What if, more often than not, you committed as a family or an individual to say, you know what, we're going to go out of our way and talk to someone, whether we're close, and those are the easy ones, but still do that. But even the people we kind of don't know, and say, hey, you want to go down, and I'll make it easy. You want to go down to the food court down there and just get something to eat together? We'll meet you down there. That is transformative. What if you use that also for your friends that are outside of church? And said, hey, we're going to church. You can come with us, but if not, we're going to go over here. We'd love to meet you. Why don't you come on over? It's a neutral ground, right? For us, and I'll close with this, this is powerful stuff. This is powerful because it transforms. My wife and I, when we got married, and we were doing ministry in San Diego, and we moved back up here, because this is where she grew up, we were trying to find churches. And because, we didn't have a connection with any church. And so we're driving around trying to make connections, and we went to this tiny little church, actually smaller than our church is very small this morning, but smaller than us. And we're at that church, and it's easy to be seen when you're at a smaller church, because you're like, one of these things doesn't belong here. And it was us. And we had no kids, and it was Steph and I, and this lady who's not in our generation. There's pretty much very little we have in common except for our faith. And she didn't even know if we had a faith. She goes, hey, you want to come to my house? Afterwards, me and my daughter, my son-in-law, we're going to have food over our house. I did not want to go. Come on, that's a little freaky, right? But there was this genuineness to it. And truth was, we had no other options anyways. We could have easily gotten food somewhere else. But it was like, what if we took this risk? It changed the direction of our entire life. The church ended up being Crown Valley Church, which doesn't exist anymore. But it was Art and Susan Ewers who invited us. And when we were there, her daughter was Cheryl Hulse, and her son-in-law was George Hulse. And through that, we became really close friends. And our kids grew up together. Now their kids are mentoring our kids. And there's this dependence on each other. We helped plant Shoreline together with 4 other people. From that, this church was planted out of that church through that friendship, because we both sat down and prayed about it. And all right, you got to go. And it's like, we left each other for this purpose. But it changed that whole direction because we were invited into a meal. You never know what's going to happen. Now, I'm not saying every time you invite someone to a meal, something like that's going to happen. But there's a reason why there was a devotion to the common meal. And I'm very thankful that Art and Susan Ewers were committed to this. Because I know other people's lives it changes as well. They're just known for that. So I'm going to close this in prayer. And we're not going to sing afterwards. We're all going to chip in together. We know all of you can't join for the meal. I think that might be actually why there's fewer people. They're like, oh, so I got to go eat, but I had other plans and I can't, so I'm just not coming. Pretty sure that's what happened, because I was like, this is a little weird. But we know some of you can't. Some of you are like, wait, I didn't get the text, or I got it, I didn't look at it, or what? That doesn't mean your devotion has to start today, but we wanted to create those opportunities and begin going in that direction. So if you don't have prior plans and you haven't already eaten, you don't even have to eat, you just go and sit there. And you don't have to go say hi to everybody, and you don't have to say bye to everybody. Okay, I can't leave. We're just going to share a meal together. And we're going to be, as a church, putting those opportunities there all the time. But you're also set free to create opportunities outside of what the church leadership would do for you. Father, guide our steps in this. This is a different time. This isn't first century Palestine. So what does it look like for us, Lord, to be devoted to your teaching, to doing life together, to the common meal, and the prayers? Guide us. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.